Talk is a fundamental part of our lives and our education. Oracy isn't just any talk that is happening. It is purposeful classroom talk which develops children's speaking and listening skills and enhances their learning through talk. Oracy improves children and young people's academic attainment in all subjects, providing a gateway not only to improved reading and writing, but also to learning across the whole curriculum. It also supports their well-being by providing the tools children need to talk through their feelings, and is fundamental in becoming an active citizen, enabling us to express our views, influence others, and navigate disagreements. Lacking oracy skills negatively impacts young people's lives beyond school. Less than half of unemployed young people think that their schooling helped them develop effective oracy skills necessary for their future success, which is much lower when compared to full-time students or those in work. We know that the ability to speak and communicate clearly is an essential ingredient to future success, yet it remains undervalued in our current education system. Schools prioritise oracy differently from, say, reading or writing because there is a lower expectation that they will, meaning that for many children, their opportunity to develop these vital skills is left to chance. Students facing disadvantage, who are more likely to start school behind age-related language expectations, need explicit teaching throughout school to develop these skills. The COVID-19 pandemic has widened this existing language gap. 2/3 of primary school teachers think school closures have had a negative impact on the spoken language development of their most disadvantaged children, compared with 1/5 for most advantaged pupils. This has increased the imperative to act now. Oracy can help to address the educational divide worsened by the pandemic. It can help to close the attainment gap, and it can help to support children and young people's well-being and employability as we emerge from this crisis. The Oracy All-Party Parliamentary Group inquiry has collated evidence from across the education sector and wider society. We've spoken with hundreds of teachers to better understand why schools' approaches to oracy remain inconsistent, and what can be done to ensure teachers and schools are better supported. And we heard from many students too about why oracy is important to them and what the impact is for those who miss out. We believe there is an indisputable case for oracy as an integral aspect of all children's education. We want to see a shift in emphasis on oracy in our education system, which 1. Raises the status and priority of oracy, 2. Sets out shared expectations for oracy across schools, and 3. Empowers teachers and schools to develop their students' oracy skills, providing them with tools and resources they need to do this. Taking these steps will help meet the needs of students and their teachers, ensuring that our children and young people develop the oracy skills they need to become confident communicators and thrive in school, life and work. Find out more about the Oracy All-Party Parliamentary Group and how we can work together to make this a reality. Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Oracy report launch. This has been a long time in its making, and I'm so delighted that we have got here. Our inquiry is finished and the report is ready to go. We have a stellar lineup of speakers and panelists, and welcome to all the participants who are joining at the moment. I'm going to give those people joining just a few more seconds before we start officially, just because I can see the numbers of participants slowly rising as people log in. It's a shame that we're not all there in person, but I'm sure we can demonstrate our oracy skills through the medium of technology. So enough from me. I'm going to quickly tell you who we've got coming to talk to us today. We've got Tom Hunt MP from the Education Select Committee, Wes Streeting MP, Shadow Schools Minister, Jeff Barton, the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, Riza Laher, talking about what it's like in their school, and Rachel de Souza, who's the new Children's Commissioner for England, and Marika Rydell, a Year 12 student from School 21. And I'm so pleased that we have the voice of young people on this report launch. But we're also hearing from business. We've got Matthew Percival, the Director of People and Skills at the CBI. We've got Jessica Ogheneweka, the Social Mobility Commissioner. And we've got Lamida Onaya, the Youth Advisor and co-founder of LIVE. So I'm really excited to be hearing from all of them. And looking at who we've got in terms of participants, we have, and it's climbing up to nearly 300 people listening. So welcome everybody who's listening remotely. And I'm sure that that number is going to continue to rise as we get started. And thank you all panelists for being here. I realize you're all extremely busy people, and I really appreciate you taking the time out. I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the report's key findings, and then I'm going to crack on listening to the rest of the speakers. So it's been almost 2 years since we launched the Speak for Change inquiry, and we've had a general election, Brexit, and then a global pandemic. So it would be an understatement to say it has been an eventful time. Back at the start of the inquiry, myself and the members of the Oracy APPG hoped to shine a light on an issue that we all felt had been overlooked and undervalued for too long, and use our voices to amplify awareness of Oracy and the need for change. What has been achieved over the last 2 years has been so much more than we anticipated. Inquiry has sparked interest, captured imaginations, and engaged with many hundreds of teachers and students up and down the United Kingdom. We have covered a vast range of interests and areas, exploring all aspects of the access, provision, status, and value of Oracy education. Our thinking has been informed by over 130 pieces of written evidence, 5 oral evidence sessions, roundtables, public events, case studies, and polling. We have heard from the leading academics, international experts, key education influencers and decision makers, school leaders, teachers, and most importantly, of course, children and young people. And the message has been resounding. Oracy in education matters. We are not doing it well enough, and we need to do it better now. So today in this report, we launch our vision for Oracy and the practical recommendations that will help us make progress on that vision in the coming weeks, months, and years. And it couldn't be more important for us to act now. The evidence we received on the impact of the COVID-19 on school closures on children's spoken language skills paints a stark picture, with the already persistent language gap further exacerbated. Just yesterday, the BBC reported the Education Endowment Foundation research, which found that over 3/4 of the primary schools said pupils starting school in September 2020 needed more support with communication than in previous years, and 96% were concerned about pupils' speech and language development. Our polling confirmed this position, but found that concerns stretched far beyond early years and that the impact was disproportionately felt by the most disadvantaged, with 2/3 of all primary teachers across all stages and nearly half of secondary school teachers saying school closures had a negative effect on spoken language development of students eligible for pupil premium, compared with 1 in 5 teachers for more advantaged pupils. The inquiry left us in no doubt that Oracy education cannot be viewed as a nice to have, a project or initiative that can come and go, or an extra curricular opportunity for a self-selecting few, a preserve of those with the inclination or opportunity to teach it, or something only valued at the beginning of a child's education journey, but instead a golden thread that runs throughout it. Is much too important to be left to chance, and the positive benefits of Oracy education, academic outcomes, well-being, employability, civic engagement, and social equity matter. These are too important to miss out, especially for those young people that need it the most. So Oracy education is a moral imperative. Just as talk is at the heart of how we communicate, learn, discover, explore, express, interact, relate, empathize, create, collaborate, and connect, so must Oracy be at the heart of education. And teachers know this. 80% of head teachers and 62% of classroom teachers said Oracy should be treated as essential now schools have reopened. But 26% of classroom teachers say Oracy is not a priority in their school. And only 8% of teachers strongly agree that their school has a consistent approach to Oracy. As a former primary school teacher, I've spent a fair share of my time in the classroom, and I know firsthand the conditions that schools operate in, the pressure, challenges, incentives, and competing priorities that they face. These can act as barriers often to focusing on what we know is the most important. So today we're calling for a shift in educational culture and values, policy and practice to raise the status and priority of Oracy in education. This means acknowledging that despite what is included in the current national curriculum on speaking and listening, Oracy education is not being consistently or comprehensively provided in our schools. Less than half of primary teachers and a quarter of secondary teachers say they're confident in their understanding of the spoken language requirements outlined in the national curriculum. Only 14% of classroom teachers felt their school was meeting the spoken language requirements of the national curriculum to a great extent. If national requirements on reading or maths were not routinely understood or implemented, action would be taken. So we are asking the government to provide non-statutory guidance to support schools in offering a high-quality oral education to their students. We need to go further than this. Oracy's status in education is affected by its lack of currency within our assessment and accountability frameworks. So I want to see the return of an oral language component as part of the grading at GCSE level. With the growing noise around the need to rethink and reshape our assessment system and approach to accountability in the wake of the pandemic, there's a golden opportunity to consider how skills like Oracy can be part of a broad and balanced appraisal of a young person's skills and capabilities. We also want to see shared expectations for Oracy so that all children's entitlement to Oracy education can be fulfilled by every teacher in every classroom. The inquiry found that Oracy had been a Cinderella discipline compared to reading, writing, or numeracy, and that a lack of shared understanding and expectations for Oracy education fed the inconsistent, sporadic, and too often inadequate provision. And to achieve these expectations, we need to equip and empower teachers and schools to provide sustained and comprehensive high-quality Oracy education. This means investing in professional development at every stage, from initial teacher training through early careers framework and beyond. It means including Oracy as part of a funded policy initiatives, such as opportunity areas and English hubs. It means ensuring that Oracy is part of any recovery or catch-up investment. The amount of evidence we received and the length and detail of this report, it's huge, which only really scratches the surface, is testament on how much there is to do. There is so much opportunity too. Throughout this inquiry, I was overwhelmed by the amazing existing Oracy practice that was shared with us. Teachers and schools from all different parts of the country serving diverse communities, and it's great to have so many of you here listening today, who have told us about the steps they've taken and the changes they had made to prioritise Oracy education in their schools, not because they had to, and sometimes in spite of rather than because of demands of the system, but because the research and evidence and their knowledge and understanding of their students and communities told them it was the right thing to do. They told us their hopes and ambitions for the children and young people they serve and the obstacles and challenges those young people face in achieving them. And they told us the impact that Oracy education was having on the children and young people's success in school and in life beyond school. These schools can light the way. The start of this report is a long quote, which I've nearly finished, but if you indulge me, I will read an extract from. We welcome the growth and interest in oral language in recent years, for we cannot emphasise too strongly our conviction of its importance in the education of the child. We have discussed at length the part it plays from the preschool years onwards, its essential place in preparing a child for reading, its function as an instrument of learning and thinking, its role in social and emotional development. As a consumer, a worker, a voter, a member of their community, each person has a pressing reason for being able to evaluate the words of others. They have equally pressing reasons for making their own voice heard. In recent years, many schools have gone a long way to asserting this aspect of education as one of their most important responsibilities. There is still a great deal to be done. A priority objective for all schools is a commitment to the speech needs of their pupils and a serious study of the role of oral language in learning. The quote is from the Bullnock Inquiry, which was launched in under 50 years ago in 1972. 50 years. And the words are as true today as they were then. We could see that rather as depressing an embarrassment indictment of education progress at this time, let's instead call it a call to action. Let's use this report as a moment to change the conversation. Let's stop just talking about Oracy and start acting now. Thank you. And that's as brief as I could make it, so thank you for indulging me, everybody. I'm so pleased to invite the first comment actually from Robert Halfon, who is chair of the Education Select Committee. Unfortunately, couldn't make it at this time, but he has recorded us a short message, which we can play now, I hope.
I welcome this report from my colleagues, which draws attention to an important issue that we often take for granted. our ability to communicate effectively is instrumental throughout our lives. But as the report shows, our education system isn't always placing enough of a priority on the crucial skills that young people will need to succeed in school and in their life beyond school, in employment and as citizens. COVID has shown a light on the pervasive inequality in our education system. It's deeply concerning that yet again we're seeing the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on our most disadvantaged students, this time on their spoken language, which will have a knock-on effect on academic attainment and future opportunities. While some children may have flourished at home, others have missed out on hundreds of hours of language immersion at school, and this could have lasting effects. It's not a new issue. We already know that 75% of children who persistently experience poverty arrive at school below age-related language expectations. And whilst we have to intervene early, we're failing to address these growing language gaps throughout a child's education. A focus on oracy in education will help to level the playing field, enabling children to learn how to communicate effectively, debate and articulate themselves with confidence. The report highlights the demand from employers who prize skills, communication skills, so highly. Parents who want their children to leave school with the confidence and skills they need to progress and succeed, and most importantly, from the young people themselves. It presents the opportunity to support teachers in realising the high value they place on oracy by removing the barriers preventing them prioritising it in the classroom. And the opportunity to spread the excellent practice showcased in the report from schools leading the way in embedding oracy, so we can start to address the inconsistency across schools, which again disproportionately affects those children who need oracy education the most. To me, oracy is a no-brainer. It helps with mental health and well-being. It increases educational attainment, and it gives young people the chance to climb on the jobs and skills ladder of opportunity. Thank you to Emma Hardy, who I used to work with on my education committee. I have huge respect for the work that she has done on oracy from the moment she entered the House of Commons, and also all her colleagues in the parliamentary group from all parties for their work in getting oracy on the agenda. There's clearly much room for improvement, both in the immediate term to ensure catch-up support addresses these gaps in language across all ages, and in the longer term. So our education system is ambitious enough for young people and recognises the skills they need to thrive in the real world. I hope we can rise to the challenge and embed oracy in all parts of our education. Thank you.
Great, and I really appreciate that message from him, who has been, when I was on the committee with him, he was always very supportive of the work we were trying to do on oracy. So I'm really pleased he was able to record as a message. And now I want to kind of hear from Tom Hunt MP, who's a member of the Education Select Committee, and Wes Streeting MP, who's our Labour's Shadow Schools Minister, just for them to talk briefly about oracy's place in education policy and sort of what their reaction is to the report. And I'll start with Tom, and just to kind of thinking about the report calling for this shift in emphasis in education to increase status and priority of oracy. What kind of your reaction to that? And welcome, Tom, a new Vice Chair of the All Party Group. Look forward to your contribution.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo Rob's comments in terms of appreciating the work that you've done on this and the amount of time it's taken. But you've assembled a wonderful report. It's one of the best reports I've read for a long time, and I think it's hugely positive. And I look forward to contributing in a small way in future to support you with what you've been doing. I mean, I think I saw for the first time the importance of oral communication skills when I was actually at university, and I was involved in competitive debating. at Manchester University, and I worked with the charity Debate Mate, and I actually became a debate mentor at an all-girls school in a deprived part of Manchester. And for 6 months, I worked with them. And then at the end of that 6 months, they entered the regional competition. And I saw the transformation over those 6 months. The girls that I was working with at the start of it, they weren't confident. They didn't feel confident expressing their views or opinions. And by the end of it, 6 months down the line, it was incredibly fulfilling to see what, the transformation. So that was the first time that the penny dropped with me about the importance of this. And I'm very proud that in the report that you've put together, the Oaks Primary School in Ipswich is at the heart of that report. On page 15, there's an extensive case study. And then also the Special Educational Needs Coordinator is quoted on page 29. I visited Oaks Primary School just about 6 weeks ago, which is in Chantry, which is an area of town with significant pockets of deprivation, and it's a school that has gone on quite a journey over the last decade to now being at the point where it's rated outstanding. Its academic results have been transformed in that time, at the same time as it's been placing a huge emphasis on oracy. So that the evidence that the two things, in my view, are connected, very much connected. But I have to say, I, as somebody who is on the education select committee, passionately agrees with this agenda, I hadn't really heard of the term before I visited the Oaks Primary School, which might be sort of part of the job we have to do in terms of raising awareness. But I think it couldn't be more important. We all here care about equality of the opportunity. We care about social mobility, and clearly part of that is skills, it's academic results. But it needs to be oracy as well. It needs to be ensuring that all of our young children have access to a language-rich environment at school, so in many senses they don't miss out on the last hurdle. And I talk about employability. What we don't want is a situation where we do make great progress in terms of academic progress and skills for our young people, but then it gets to the interview or something else, and they don't do as well as they could do. They don't do as well as their talent should allow them to do. So that is why I think oracy needs to have, there needs to be an equal focus on oracy as there is on other skills. So as somebody coming to this quite new, I agree with the comments made by the chair that, and obviously the report's findings that the situation has been made more challenging as a result of this crisis. But we know that this pandemic is a call for action on many fronts, and it needs to be a call for action on oracy as well. It's never been more important that we embed it in the curriculum. We make it so that schools are assessed on it and are encouraged to focus on it. And we can ensure that every young child in this country has the ability to acquire all communication skills that enable them to thrive in life. So that's what I've got to say. And I pay tribute to Emma and the work she's done and everyone else who's worked on this report. And I'm incredibly proud of the Oaks Primary School in Chantry, and Jeremy and its leadership team, who have put oracy at the heart of their curriculum. It's been shown to benefit their academic results, as well as the mental health and the life prospects of the children in Chantry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Tom. And you're right, the school you mentioned in your constituency is an absolutely excellent example. Recommend everyone has a particular look at the case study. Really delighted that we have Wes with us, who, as I've mentioned, is Labour's Shadow Schools Minister, for his reaction to the report and what he thinks should be changed now. Welcome, Wes.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on launching this fantastic and very timely report. And following on from Tom, I should probably give a shout out to School 21, who've been pioneering so much of this work as well. So, I'm going to do my bit repping East London, despite my national responsibilities too. I thought your introduction, Emma, where you quoted the Bullet report, was very apposite, because there are loads of things that have come to the forefront. I think Robert Halfon described it as shining a spotlight during the pandemic. Digital exclusion, the issues around school nutrition, food poverty, hunger, the attainment gap. They're not new issues, and this is not a new issue. And it may be that the pandemic has, I hope, woken up some people in the Department of Education who've lost sight of the importance of the attainment gap, and having closing the attainment gap as a driving mission. But I think for lots of us, we were acutely aware of the current state of educational disadvantage in our country going into the pandemic. And I hope that if anything can come out of this miserable year we've been through, it's restoring that laser-like focus on closing the gap between those from the most and least disadvantaged backgrounds. And this agenda is really important. It's important in terms of, as we've already heard from Robert and Tom, important in terms of employment and the future work opportunities of young people. And that's at the forefront of our mind at a time when we know that young people are bearing the brunt of rising unemployment in our country. It's also important because those of us who come from working class families and backgrounds understand the central importance of education to our own life chances and opportunities and those of others from our kind of backgrounds. I would not be addressing you today as a member of parliament and a shadow minister without the transformational power that state education had on my life, enabling me to go from a council estate in Tower Hamlets to the House of Commons. And, you know, the journey will look different. The paths will look different from kids from backgrounds like mine. Not everyone will want to be an MP, and I don't blame them, having been here for 6 years. But the important thing is that circumstances of our birth doesn't equate to our destinies. And this brings me on to the broader importance of Oracy. Of course, employment, employability, and future job prospects are important. But Oracy is also a skill for life. And those of us who are members of Parliament will understand acutely that so much of our work, the bit of our job actually most people don't see, and yet it's such a huge part of our job, is helping so many people who struggle to navigate the system, struggle to navigate public services, struggle to get access to the things that they're entitled to, whether decent quality housing or access to social services, being able to negotiate on behalf of your children to get access to the things that they're entitled to, particularly if they have special educational needs or disability, what lots of families experience often as a constant battle. Often the thing that makes families struggle more than anything is not ever having been equipped to negotiate on their own behalf, to advocate for themselves. And that's why Oracy isn't just a skill for work, it's a skill for life. And it's such a fundamental, thinking about the last year we've had and the impact it's had on our relationships and our ability to see people, the people we love, the people we work with, the people we socialize with. Our social interactions are such a huge part of who we are. And being able to speak is a really important part of being who we are. And I think it's a certain irony that the English language is one of our country's most successful exports. And in educational terms, we spent so much time on focusing on kids' reading and writing skills, but not nearly enough time on their English speaking skills. And that's got to change, and this is a call to action. I'm delighted we've got over 300 people here. I think that reflects the statistics you quoted, Emma, about the importance that teachers themselves place on Oracy. But that brings me on to a theme that I've been talking about and will continue to talk about a lot as Labour's Shadow Schools Minister, which is the most precious resource we have in our schools are the people who work in them. All of the evidence shows that if we want to get the best outcomes for kids, especially those from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, we have to invest in our staff. And both teaching staff and support staff can have a real impact on children's educational outcome on this agenda as well as more broadly. And yet we know that despite being a statutory part of the national curriculum, fewer than a quarter of secondary teachers and fewer than half of primary teachers say they're confident in their understanding of the spoken language requirements outlined in the national curriculum. So I think we've got to do a lot more investing in the training and development of staff and their ongoing professional training and development throughout their careers, not just ITT and not just the early careers framework. And embedding Oracy as part of ongoing professional development is going to be really important to upskill our staff and give them the confidence. I hope that the government takes up your call to publish non-statutory guidance, because there is loads of great practice out there, loads of great stuff going on. So let's learn from that, let's share it, and let's get it embedded right across schools. And you mentioned the accountability side, Emma, as well, which I also think is particularly important. And this is an agenda beyond education. I think one of the consequences of the pandemic has been what has already been a pretty challenging situation for families in terms of getting ready access to EHCPs for kids with particularly with speech and language challenges, something that came up in the Commons education questions just this week. It was already a problem before the pandemic. It is worse now. And we've got to make sure that health community services and those speech and language therapies for those children that face more acute needs are brought up to speed, and that this is given the priority and the urgency it deserves. So I really hope that today's report is a call to action. We can see by the numbers of, you know, if we can you imagine if we were in the House of Commons right now in a packed committee room with 300 people, I think that would be a very vocal and visible reflection of the importance of this agenda, the level of support and interest out there. So now let's make sure we've got the leadership from government that we need to.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Wesson, for taking the time. And I know you have to disappear quickly, so I really appreciate you and Tom both making the time to pop this morning. Now, I just want to hear now more slightly different perspectives, the view from educators. What are the challenges and opportunities for schools in prioritising Oracy? I know I've mentioned having been a teacher myself, there are many competing priorities for schools and for teachers. So where are the opportunities, though, to really look at doing what teachers, I believe, have shown in the polling that we've seen, that they value Oracy and that it matters to them? So I want to hear first from Jeff Barton, who's the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I think it's fair to say that Oracy is an ugly word, but it's a really important concept. And I think what this report does is to bring it bang up to date and centre stage, because, you know, one of the earliest school inspectors was George Sampson, who wrote this book, English for the English, in 1921, and said, as he mapped out the first national curriculum, essentially, there is no more practical subject in the whole of English than speech, and there is no subject more generally neglected. That was 1921. So let's do something about that. And what I'd like to do in my 2 minutes or so is to say why this matters for children and young people, but why this matters and what we need to do in terms of teachers, and, as Wes hinted at, teaching assistants, who have a crucial role, it seems to me, in literacy. And I know, as an English teacher for many years, often if I couldn't get through to a group of young people, that teaching assistant could speak to them, listen to them, articulate things in a way which was extraordinary, and we need to put them, I think, centre stage as well. So let's talk about why this matters for children. Well, the report reaffirms that this isn't soft, fluffy stuff, is it? This isn't about kids chatting in classrooms, it's not about conversations. This is about what Neil Mercer calls exploratory talk. It's teachers asking the right kinds of questions and giving young people the right kind of space to be able to answer more deeply those kinds of questions. It's children being able to read better because they've got better at listening. And as Debbie Myhill, University of Exeter, says, being able to write better because they can speak better. These things underpin our ability to express what we see of the world and understand the world. And that's why I think what the report is doing today, for those people who had seen this as being on the margins, like too often it's felt from a kind of ministerial point of view in the department, this is felt on the margins, this underpins everything, particularly for those young people who don't come from a background which is full of books, which is full of people who can have conversation with you. They need us more than ever to understand the importance of Oracy and what it's going to do to help them to achieve, in the broadest sense. And as Roy Blatchford, I notice in the chat, says, this is about giving everyone dignity, for them to be able to talk in the way that we're talking and listen in the way that we know how to listen. So you make a very strong case, and it's now for all of us to make sure that that shows up one way or another. That's why it matters so much to children and young people. All the evidence is out there. The Education Endowment Foundation, for example, talks about the significance of good quality feedback, of good quality collaborative work. All of those skills and bits of knowledge are there for us now to reharness, I think. Secondly, though, I go back to George Sampson, who also said in 1921, every teacher in English is a teacher of English. And what that means is, whether I'm teaching year 3 or year 6, whether I'm teaching PE or teaching maths, I have a responsibility to model the way language is used, but to give you as a pupil the opportunity for you to be learning about that as well. And one of the greatest things we could now do is to say that whether it's in teacher training, whether it's in early career framework, whether it's in the CPD, that ought to be an entitlement for every member of staff, including teaching assistants in school, that what we start saying is, remember your responsibility as a maths teacher. the way you are getting young people to explore their maths, to articulate the problems, giving them the space to be able to talk about it. And one of the things I was proudest about in my time in headship was the way we tried to make whole school literacy move from being rhetoric into reality. Well, let's do the same for Oracy, and that's the challenge you give us today. So I'm delighted to support the report. I think it's a terrific piece of work, and thank you very much, Emma and the team, for asking me along today.
Thank you so much. It's interesting you highlight that book from 1921. So we have the book in 1921 and the report in 1972, and here we are in 2021 making the same arguments. It really is time for action now. Now I'm really pleased to hear from Riaz Lahia, who's the executive head teacher from a school in Leicester, to explain what it's like in his school. Welcome, Riaz.
Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honour to be here for the Speak for Change report launch that so honourably set out to improve Oracy education for every child in every school. The wonderful thing about being ahead and working in schools is that every child in every school is a story, and every school is filled with stories that we can make better as educationalists. Now, as we have found in school with the loss of so many lives and livelihoods this last year, is that too many of these stories have become even more heartbreaking than ever before. Disadvantage has been amplified, and educational inequity has got worse than it ever has been before. We've seen that on the ground, in our cohorts. Whilst on the whole, all schools have responded extremely well to the current crisis and new challenges, what is clear is that we need to continue to be brave, to be determined, unified and dynamic as school leaders and as a profession, in order to use this opportunity to improve the lives of young people and life chances in this world beyond COVID, or hopefully beyond COVID. The immense pressure, however, demands an immediacy of education. Doesn't always make doing the right thing easy. It isn't always easy. Sometimes the immediate challenges take precedent. And it's for this reason that I believe this report, with its research, many findings, contributions and recommendations, and a focus or consensus even on the entitlement of Oracy, is both timely and of critical importance. So the focus on Oracy in our schools has been a powerful, forceful change for us in so many ways, for our schools, our learning community and our students. If time permits, I'm going to give a very small glimpse of our journey and why we prioritised Oracy and communication a few years ago and placed it at the very heart of our curriculum and in everything that we do. So almost 5 years ago on appointment, 2 schools steadily performing above average. We had significantly high percentage of disadvantaged students, significantly high percentage of EAL, located in an area of high levels of deprivation across indicators. In the same area, incidentally, as Wes mentioned, that I grew up in my council house with similar circumstances, just another story like every one of our students. But now, many years later, with an ambition for our students beyond anything that I could have ever dreamed of. But I wanted more for them, more than I could have. But the recurring theme from our students was that they wanted more, but not outcomes. They wanted more identity, more self-belief, more confidence, to express themselves and their views, and conversely to appreciate the views of others. They wanted to be equipped with the skills and foundations to be able to do this, to not be seen as a problem, to have a voice, just like those in more affluent areas seemingly already have. Now, we are nowhere near where we want to be. This is a journey, it's a never-ending story. But our students, staff and learning community will say today that we are 2 far more happier schools than the ones 5 years ago, and that's the best measure of all. Oracy communication and honesty are the golden threads that run through our school in every aspect. We've improved teaching and learning, of course, and we are on a strong upward trend of high performance across academic and pastoral measures. The students are now more confident in themselves and their identity. They have a stronger voice in the school and outside the school. I've seen students firsthand all the time discuss complex, polarized issues with a maturity that we as adults struggle with. Now, we didn't do it for outcomes. We did it because it matters, because we listened to our students and because it was the right thing to do. And sadly, this is not always easy. So this report makes it clear that Oracy can be a powerful force for change. In our school tradition, we have a saying that goes that there is a voice that doesn't use words, listen. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And I think you're right to highlight the bravery I think it takes sometimes to go and try and do things different, and that it's not easy. But what you've shown from your testimony is that it does matter, it does make a difference, and it is successful. So thank you. I know how busy head teachers are, so thank you again for coming here. Now I want to just move on to sort of thinking about, why is it important for young people to express their views and to speak up? Why does that matter? So I'm really, really pleased that we've got Dame Rachel de Souza, who's the Children's Commissioner from England, who's going to talk to us a little bit and hopefully talk a little bit about the Big Ask, which she's launched recently. But I'm also delighted that we have a young person joining us today. We've got Marika Rydell, who's a Year 12 student from Schools 21. But first, I'd like to hear from Children's Commissioner about, why does listening to young people matter? And thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, Emma, and it's great to read your report. I mean, as a head teacher and teacher of 30 years, I can only endorse all of it, but I'm here today as Children's Commissioner. And yeah, absolutely. We've just launched our Big Ask survey. My view is it's time to give something back to children. Children in England, after the huge sacrifices they've made during the COVID pandemic, I think, and we haven't heard their voices, and we haven't seen them, and it's absolutely essential that we do. So we launched the Big Ask last week. We're just tipping 100,000 responses, and we're bolstering. I think I've crashed the DFE website twice because the nation's children are on it, but with a bit of help from Marcus Rashford, we're getting this survey out right across the country, and I'm definitely going to be coming to a school near you. I'm going all around the country to schools. I'm going to be in Bolton with the DCS on Friday, and all of the Bolton schools are doing the Big Ask together, and we're basically making our way right around the country to get it filled in. And I mean, just of those 100,000, I've got the six, so they're all ages from 4 to 18, but I've just got a few in from the 6 to 8-year-olds, and I just wanted to read a few of the things that they're telling us to you. So we asked them, if you could change anything to make your life better when you grow up, what would it be? And some of the things they're telling us: I'd love to give money to poor children so they can live happily and eat properly. I want the people not to get sick, and I want to give the homeless people some care. I want more equality and women getting the same payment as men. I want a house with a garden so I can play. I want to be able to go places for fun without it being too expensive. I want to change dad and mum's work and let them play with me more. I mean, you're just reading this stuff, and as soon as you read it, you know why it's important, and you know why amplifying children's voices are important. The kinds of things that are coming out to us from the young people are a huge focus on mental health. There's barely one conversation that I have, and I've had hundreds of conversations throughout the pandemic and since, and young people are talking to us about anxiety, issues around mental health. We've got to act on this. They're talking to us about education and absolute passion and desire for education. Keeping them away from school for 19 weeks has definitely made them realise just how much they want it. About family and family strain and issues around family, about work and a desire for meaningful work, and really strongly places to go, things to do in their local communities. And they're also talking to us about fairness in society. You heard some of those, and climate. So we're getting some brilliant feedback. And my challenge is, if we're giving them their voice, what are we going to do about it? And that's why, following on, once we've reported on what England's children are telling us about what they need now and what they need for their futures, I think we need to be thinking about a really excellent joined up childhood strategy, based on the voices of students. And let's not forget the most vulnerable. On Monday, I was in a secure mental health ward talking to children, and they were telling me about how they'd been let down in the past and how they needed help with speaking up. One young man explaining to me how he'd experienced several bereavements, and his dealing with that came out as aggression to others, because in his words, he didn't have any other way to communicate it. Oracy is absolutely critical. More than 60% of our young people in the youth justice system with difficulties with speech, language and communication. And I mean, we know this. We know that Oracy is absolutely fundamental, and especially for the most vulnerable. So my job and my passion is going to be to get these voices, collect these voices, share them, and absolutely empower young people. Now, we shouldn't rely solely on children speaking up in order to make sure their rights are protected, but Oracy education is a massive step in empowering young people to be able to speak up for themselves. So I'm right behind your report. I want us all behind this report because it's a key step in children's voices being heard, so we can promote and protect their rights.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your support, and I really look forward to hearing more from the Big Ask, and hopefully even welcoming you up to Hull if you come up this way.
I'm going to Scunthorpe, so I can easily nip over to my old school in Scunthorpe, but I'll definitely nip over and see you in Hull, Emma.
Brilliant. Now I'm so pleased we've got Marika Rydell, who's a Year 12 student from Schools 21, to give her perspective, because we couldn't have an event talking about the importance of young people's voices without, of course, hearing from young people. So delighted you can join us, Marika, and look forward to your contribution.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here and to be able to share my views on why I believe Oracy education is beneficial to students. And so as mentioned just now, I'm a Year 12 student, and that means I've been at School 21 for 6 years now. And throughout my time here, Oracy has always been an essential part of our unique curriculum, which doesn't solely focus on academic attainment, but instead also prepares students for their futures by equipping them with skills developed with the assistance of our Oracy curriculum. And so just before I explain what I consider those skills to be and about the wider impact of Oracy education, I'd like to just briefly talk about how Oracy has been implemented in my curriculum throughout my time at School 21. So in my first year of secondary school, we had dedicated Oracy lessons in our timetables, where we were actively taught the art of spoken language. And this included engaging in Harkness debates and group discussions, where we developed both our listening and our articulatory skills. And we learned about the linguistic, cognitive, social, emotional, and physical factors that make oral communication and public speaking effective. And as secondary school progressed, I believe Oracy continued to be implemented into school life in general. So at the end of every school year, each student had to perform a 5-minute speech without notes to quite a large audience with the aim to inspire. So a range of topics was spoken about. We had speeches about inequality, body image, mental health, race, and a student also delivered a speech about the Syrian refugee crisis at the House of Lords. So as each year passed, it was clear to see how much confidence had developed, and that students were no longer just using their voices, just learning how to use their voices, but had gradually become empowered to be able to use their voices to make a difference, to make a change in their communities or in society in general. So I believe as students, we realized just how much of an impact Oracy education had had on what we were capable of when we got the opportunity to go out into the world of work during 2 5-month work placements in Year 10. And we had students work with and give presentations to senior figures at places including New Scotland Yard, HSBC, and the Ministry of Justice. And this definitely wouldn't have been possible without the foundations that we had built in earlier years and the skills we were equipped with throughout secondary school relating to Oracy. However, my experience is an example of how, I guess, good oratory skills can pave the way for further opportunities. So as part of my work placement in Year 10, I did, which I did with Salesforce, I had to present to an audience of around 2,000 Salesforce employees with 2 of my other peers. And following this, due to the, I guess, oratory skills I displayed during that event, I've been asked by Salesforce to be part of various events following that. And that includes doing a speech in front of an audience, which included Sadiq Khan and Dame Jane Ann Guardia, which was the CEO of Salesforce in the UK and Ireland at the time. So with all of these examples, it's clear to see that Oracy education has enabled each of our students to do amazing things and has made them believe that they can be successful in the future, especially when there's such a large emphasis on good communication skills in the workplace. And I think it's important to note that this is all despite our students being from Newham, which is arguably one of the most deprived areas, I guess, in London. And despite this, our students students have all been capable of achieving great things. And, however, we are all aware that this isn't the case for all students. And I consider myself to be quite lucky, because if I didn't go to the school, I would be a lot less confident, articulate. I wouldn't believe that my voice can have an impact. And I definitely wouldn't have had any of these opportunities and experiences. So I believe ultimately the opportunities and experiences that you have had have a major role to play in facilitating future success. And therefore, the opportunity to receive a highly rewarding Oracy education, it shouldn't just be a privilege that only a very small proportion of students receive. I believe it should be implemented from a young age. So I think this is really important, because I feel like everyone should have the ability to express and voice their opinions, especially when there's such a need for change in society. And an Oracy education for the many would ensure that, as mentioned throughout this report, to ensure that disadvantaged students are able to fulfill their potential, narrowing the attainment gap, which, as you all have said, has become even more apparent during COVID. So that's pretty much it from me. And I hope that my perspective has provided you with even more evidence that finding a way to implement a sustained form of Oracy education in schools will be of huge benefit. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I'm amazed at how articulate. See, I can't even say it now. I'm sort of in awe now, and I've lost the power to speak myself. But that was incredible, incredible, passionate, informed, and a perfect example of the importance of high quality Oracy. And I'm sure you will go on to do and be and achieve great things. And thank you so much for joining us. I thought you were amazing. Talking of moving on, doing and achieving great things, I want to now quickly hear about the importance of Oracy for employability and social mobility, because of course it isn't just about, as Wes was saying, isn't it just about Oracy in terms of achieving work, because it's also about self-expression, but having good oral communication skills will really help in terms of employability. So I want to hear first from Matthew Percival, who's the Director of People and Skills at the CBI. Welcome, Matthew.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to join you. Education has never been just about preparing people for work, but it's clearly one of those important measures that if we're missing the mark, we ask ourselves the question of how can we improve the situation? How can we have education better prepare people for successful lives and successful careers in business? And I think there is definitely an Oracy component to this. So in my couple of minutes now, I'm just going to briefly speak about what it is that employers tell us they value in hiring young people and school leavers. What's their perspective on how well we're doing at the moment? How has COVID changed things over the last year, and maybe what are some of the ways forward? When we ask businesses about their skills gaps, and this is in their workforce as a whole, not just talking about school leavers, this is the whole workforce, adults too, as well as young people. A lack of work readiness, skills and behaviours, rather than a lack of knowledge and qualifications, is the most commonly cited cause of skills gaps in their organisation. And when we ask them what their priorities are for developing the skills of their workforce, and again, I stress this is about the whole workforce, all ages, rather than just young people, 15% of them put oral communication among the top 3 things they think they're still needing to develop with their whole workforce. So it resonated me with when you were saying before, Emma, about how this was not just something for early stages of education, but actually it's a lifelong skill that people keep developing. And this is clearly something employers are recognizing by putting it among their top 3, even in 15% of companies for development priorities in their workforce as a whole. Zooming in on the question of school leavers. I have a survey in the field right now, so maybe I'll have 2021's numbers in a few months' time, but for now I'll cite our last education and skills survey, when we asked the most important factors when recruiting school leavers by a distance, the number 1 factor, wider character and behaviours. Then we get down to literacy and numeracy. Then we get down to relevant work experience. And only then after that do we begin to get to employers citing actually outcomes of qualifications. Here are the most important factors. So they're looking for this broader range of knowledge and skills and character, and seeing the link of Oracy through delivering all three of those, I think is an important factor that's come out in a number of other people's contributions this morning. How well are we doing? Well, 3/4 of our members say that they're satisfied with the qualifications of school leavers, but it drops to only half when we're talking about literacy and numeracy, and it drops to only 40% when we're talking about wider characters, behaviours and attributes. And so there is a call to action for employers, not to sit there and say, well, this isn't good enough, but to actually ask the question, well, how can we play our role in helping to make a difference? And I see this come out a lot in the conversations we're having around lost learning now as well. You mentioned the evidence in this inquiry, but also the EEF's research yesterday about the impact on Oracy of COVID. That doesn't surprise me, because what we're hearing from businesses in adult education and workplace learning is that it's been an awful lot easier to be able to teach knowledge in a virtual way than it has been able to teach behaviours and skills and character. And if anything, the thing that the whole work from home experiment has taught employers is the people who've suffered a lot in their development in their careers are the young people who have not been able to learn through observation and being around other people as much. So if we're seeing the same thing in education, that wouldn't surprise me. One of the questions that we're hearing a lot from our members around this whole question of lost learning, beyond what is lost learning, what actually is different, what does it mean? I'm going to be hiring people this summer, school leavers, what do I need to know? The main question being, if a lot of the catch up that government is promising, and as I understand it, the money they've put so far towards it is a start rather than an end point in commitment to catch up. If a lot of it is going to be delivered in schools, what is the support that we're putting in place for this year's school leavers who won't still be in schools next year to benefit from that? And that's where employers are expecting they're going to need to be a delivery mechanism for some of this catch up, and being able to communicate to businesses what is the impact going to be on school leavers, and how do businesses tailor the support packages they already have in place to help young people adapt from education into work. How do we adapt those plans to be able to support young people properly, to make sure that we don't get a proportion of the young people affected whose education is affected finding they have less access to catch up than other people. So it's an agenda we're hugely interested in being able to move forward. And I think maybe one final point I'd make is, because I did see a question come up in the Q&A around why do we think that maybe Oracy is something to be assessed rather than just something to be focused on in schools. And I think one of the things that when employers look at assessment, they think that there are a whole broader range of things than is currently assessed through qualifications that they are looking for to help identify good candidates, and help identify talent to nurture in their organizations. And actually, if we can find ways to be able to assess this broader range of skills and behaviors and character rather than just the focus on knowledge, which is crucial but is part of what employers are looking for rather than the full picture, then maybe we can get to a future for assessment that also is then seen as more valuable to employers in helping to bring young people from all walks of life and all backgrounds through into their organizations, and offer them long and successful careers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really important point about it being employers, one of their top 3 priorities. We're running about 5 minutes over time, so apologies for that, but I really do want to hear from, we have 2 more people to speak, so I hope everyone can indulge us and just hang around for another 5 minutes, because I want to hear from Jessica Ogheneweke, who's the Social Mobility Commissioner, for her perspective on employability and particularly how Oracy improves social mobility. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Yes, hello, I'm Jessica Ogheneweke. I'm social mobility for Commissioner for Early Years and also a student studying global challenges. The Social Mobility Commission exists to see a UK where the circumstances of one's birth do not determine outcomes in life. As a society, we talk again and again about young people being the future, yet we do not provide every young person with the opportunities, skills, and support to achieve their full potential. As someone who is passionate about social mobility, I believe that we are currently not doing enough to support our disadvantaged children who are already experiencing an attainment gap in Oracy at 6 years old. We know that young people's social mobility and jobs prospects are hampered by their lack of focus on speaking skills. Employers in the UK labour market increasingly demand soft skills, and one of the skills gap identified and raised was oral communication. Our research found a correlation between higher levels of this soft skill and upward social mobility. We are already seeing the correlation between the language gap in childhood and how this negatively impacts social mobility later in life. As a young person, or relatively young compared to Marika, who did an amazing job, by the way, I wanted to emphasise that I'm very fortunate that I was provided with a lot of spoken language support at school and developed a lot of confidence through subjects such as drama and performing arts, which were integral in my journey to becoming a social mobility commissioner and BBCF Kids presenter. There are many young people who are currently not getting enough support at home or at school. Oracy empowers young people and gives them a voice in both academia and all aspects of life. The emphasis on COVID recovery support is vital, and we also need to invest more in our early years workers who have also really felt the impact of COVID this year, and as a sector that needs to be valued more. I've been really looking forward to hearing everyone's views today and ways we can improve Oracy education for children, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Another excellent example of the importance of Oracy with the articulate way that you just express yourself and why it matters so much to social mobility. And our final speaker is Lamida Odanya, who is the youth advisor and co-founder of Live. Welcome. And for our final speaker, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation, and I'm really privileged to speak here. So my name is Lamide Odonye, and I am the co-founder of Live. And what we do is teach soft skills as required within the work environment. And the soft skills we focus on is communication, leadership, creativity, confidence, and networking. And I believe Oracy underpins all of it. So for you to be able to communicate effectively, you need to have confidence, but for you to have confidence, you need to be able to communicate effectively as well. So communication, Oracy, it is knowing that you will be heard and you'll be listened to when being spoken. It's knowing that when you listen, you will be able to learn new things. And one of my favorite activities that we do at Live when it comes to communication and Oracy is called stand-up fillers. So essentially, every time somebody speaks, they have 2 or 3 minutes to give a topic to speak about a topic that they're interested in. And anytime they use a filler like, everybody stands up. And over time, when we did it for around 4 weeks, we saw the development from people using to speaking all throughout. And that is something I practice myself. I try to ensure that I'm speaking slowly enough to not have to use and fillers. And I'm also comfortable in the silences that are presented. So when speaking about Oracy and then the importance in employment, it is about how can you present yourself? How can you articulate yourself clearly to know that you'll be heard and listened to? Is knowing that you'll be dealing with different stakeholders, not just your peers and colleagues, but those who are higher than you. And it's also having the confidence that no matter what room you're in, you'll be able to speak your viewpoint and you'll be listened to. So I also want to leave with some solutions that the report calls for a lot of actions and recommendations, which I completely agree with, but what can you all do in your own day-to-day lives to improve Oracy of young people? So you need to create as many entry points as possible for oral communication. I remember when I was a young person, I had the opportunity to speak in assembly. My head teacher would be like, Lamide, do you want to speak in assembly today? I'm like, sure. So I'll be able to communicate with 300 young people, sharing my viewpoint. I also did things like athletics. My favorite subject was RS, and it still is to this day. And I was able to debate, have different viewpoints and express myself clearly. So provide as many viewpoints and as many entry to Oracy as possible, but also consider what barriers may affect other people from having those entries. And keep it simple, allow it to build up over time. I've been able to develop my Oracy skill over the past 10 years from secondary school all the way till now, and I know it's still growing. So how can you ask them difficult questions? How can you pose ideas? How can you teach them to practice listening to other people before responding. What can the small tweaks you can make within your lessons as a teacher or within your day-to-day life. And another thing that I want to leave you with, because I'm very conscious of time, is mentor a young person. I know that my Oracy school has been able to develop so much because of having one-to-one mentoring with a lot of different people who have invested in my life. I was able to express myself, share different points of view and share different views, and also come up to a conclusion by myself because of the way they gave me the space to do that. So who can you mentor within your network that will actually allow them to be able to speak in such a great space like this in a couple of years later? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think probably everyone will agree that the young people who've spoken today have given the most powerful testimony and evidence as to why Oracy matters. And Lamide, that was absolutely excellent. And I'm really pleased you weren't doing stand-up fillers as I've been speaking in between each of the speakers today, because I imagine quite a few of you would have been on your feet by now. We've run a few minutes over. Thank you everyone who's waited. Please now let's not let this report become something that sits on somebody's shelf and is forgotten about. Let's use this as an opportunity and a moment for change. Promote it, share it, get people talking about it, because Oracy matters more than ever. We have this report, we have the evidence. Now let's all work together to push government as much as we possibly can to make the changes that all the young people need. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And apologies, I went a little bit over time.